Like book previews. Does anyone really read those? Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about some different book trends, things that I see a lot in different books, and talk about whether I like them or not, whether I think that people like them, and that I'm really, a lot of this is I'm very curious to hear what you think about all of these different things. So it can be things like, that are more common, like character lists or dramtis, personae, epigraphs, a really big one, or like book previews. Because does anyone really read those? And I'm honestly curious if that is the case. So let's jump in and talk. And since I've mentioned, I feel like I start with book previews because that's something that I'm curious about. And I mean that both as like a preview of the book at the beginning and a preview of potentially a different book at the end. And I don't feel like I see these as often anymore, like the beginning preview. It's definitely still done because I'll come across it sometimes. And in theory, I think it makes sense. It's, hey, we're going to give you a little snippet of something that's probably kind of cool, give you an idea of what the writing's like, see if this pulls you in. I always associate this with like the 80s kind of stuff, Dragonlance, that kind of stuff. I feel like it was a lot more common then and less common now. But at the same time, I still see it every now and then. And I'm kind of torn because I feel like when I was doing a lot more random book shopping, I was a fan of this because, random book shopping, you open it up, you get a little bit, and you're like, okay, how does this sound? And I feel like it helped for that. But nowadays, I rarely find myself just like, oh, let's pick up some random stuff because I have so much stuff I know about or that I'm being recommended. And so my book buying is a lot more curated these days. So I feel like I rely on them less. I still don't really have an issue with it, but I'm very unlikely at this point, I feel like, to read that now because I'll just, try. And I've done like trying the first chapters. So I feel like something I don't think about as often. But the thing that I'm almost more curious about, specifically for others, because I know how I am on this, but I wonder if other people are differently, is at the end of the book when there's a preview for, sometimes it's like the next book in a series or sometimes it's a completely different book. I'm wondering, does anybody ever read those? Because I almost never have and almost never will. And it's like if it's the sequel, and I back in the day I used to mostly binge. So if it's the sequel and I was going to read the next book anyway, I'm like, why would I bother? And if I liked the book enough to continue, starting the next book is probably not gonna help with that decision, I guess. So like I've never really cared that much there. But then sometimes you'll see it'll like be a little preview for a different book. And I feel like this happens more often with like when they're releasing a trade paperback or like a different version of it. They'll do this to kind of, as a marketing tool. And I get it, but I feel like I've never really read those. And if I see like another book in there, it's not going to make me more likely to pick it up. So I'm really curious because that's also something I don't see super common anymore. But some publishers definitely still do it. And it's something that you'll see, like I said, with it. So I'm really curious. Do you ever read those? I'm very curious. Have you ever actually picked up a book because of one of those previews at the end where it's like, here, I'll try this book from the same publisher? I'm really curious because I never have, but I feel like, if they did it for so long, it had to have been working for someone. You'd think anyway, because you never really know with stuff like that happening. So really, really curious there. So let's move on to a couple of other things. So things we have at the beginning of the book and things we have at the ending of the book. So the dramatis personae or the character list, and then appendixes or glossaries, that sort of thing, because I'm also kind of curious on thoughts here as well. So for me, character lists, I think make sense. And I always, for whatever reason, especially with the dramatis personae, I think of Malazan, because that was the first thing that I think that I ever really like paid attention and noticed it was there. And I know I've heard from a lot of people that a lot of people really like those, that they like having the character list so they can go back and say, okay, who's this? Who's that? I have to say, though, once again, I find myself almost never actually looking through them because I used to feel like if it has here, I should kind of look through. And so I would do it completely wrong. And maybe this is why I don't like them. But even with like, like Malazan books, I would like skim through like it's going to mean something, even with like the first book, and then never look at it again. So like it would rarely happen. Very occasionally, if it's like, a long series or something, or it's a character, I'm like, I can't remember who that is, and I'm trying to like go back and find out. Very occasionally, I may flip back, but I don't find myself using them very often. It's one of those things, though, that for larger casts, I do 100% understand the reasoning behind it, and so I think honestly, it's a good thing, and it probably is a really positive that people are doing it more often, including it, and some do front, some back. But I think it does make a lot of sense to do it, just because it's yeah, I think helpful for a lot of people, even though I don't use it as much. And I'm kind of in the same boat with like appendixes, glossaries, because my first big thing for that for me was Wheel of Time. Which Wheel of Time did not technically have like a character list, but characters, important characters are in the glossary typically, so you can still look there. But there are a ton of terms, and I mean I have the encyclopedia as well too, so like I could really look things up if need be. But I back when I was really young and I was reading it, I would like I'd check it out and like look at some different things sometimes with it, because I was constantly like, oh, did I catch this or that, the other thing. But I don't use the glossaries a ton either. I think especially if you're using a lot of different fantasy terms or having history, it can be a really great addition if you want to go back and refresh. And so I find that for like rereads, I'm more likely to check probably than the first time through, honestly. When I kind of like already know, but I want to like, oh, I'm check this. But I'm curious as well, because like I said, I know that a lot of people really use character lists. I don't specifically know. I can't recall having talked a lot about if people use the glossaries, appendixes, that type of thing. So once again, I'm really not confused. I don't know why I was trying to say confused. I'm really curious on those as well, because those things, the character list and the appendixes, glossary, those seem like they're more author choices, whereas like the previews, that seems more like a publisher thing and like a marketing thing. So two kind of different categories of trends, but I feel like character lists have increased, and I feel like in some cases, I feel like the glossary, the appendix, have for the most part been used less. But it kind of just depends on the series, because that is a little bit more series specific, I feel like, for both of those versus specific trends. But I'm curious once again on those ones as well. And then the big one I want to talk about, because I feel like this is something that is gonna vary a lot, is epigraphs, which are really common these days. And they've been, epigraphs have been something I've used for a long time, but I feel like the big thing that really made them popular and brought them to a lot of people is Sanderson, because Sanderson really enjoys using his epigraphs. If you're not familiar with the term, because I feel like it doesn't get talked about a ton with using the actual term, it's just like a little bit of something that's before the chapters. So Sanderson would use that a ton with like little bits of prophecies, or like little bits of world building, little bits of this, that, and the other thing in a lot of his books. And a lot of other things use them as well. Sometimes it's just like quotes, little things like that, but it's something that gives you either some information or like sets the tone for a chapter. And I'm curious, because I myself actually typically really enjoy epigraphs. I think they can, and sometimes I've definitely read books where they seem like they were just kind of thrown in for the heck of it, but they can be used really well. I will give Sanderson credit. I always think about specifically Mistborn. The epigraphs were used really well in that series to actually accomplish some big things. And then Stormlight as well, the epigraphs are typically really actually much more important than they initially seem as well. And so with both those things, I think he used it really well. And then also something like I really enjoyed, like reading through the Rune Lords by David Farland. He would use in-world quotes, so like not quotes from actual people, but in-world quotes, typically that would kind of set the tone for what was going to be happening. And it wasn't necessarily like, oh, we're going to have a quote about this and this is going to happen, but it was things that added more world building, added more history in a really short, easy way to do it, with just like a quote. But also, it just, a lot of times it set the tone. And I found myself really enjoying that. But I feel like there are probably people who are like, oh my gosh, I just skipped them. I can absolutely see people doing that. And so I'm curious as well, for all you watching this. Do you like epigraphs? Do you read them? Do you skip them? Because I really legitimately am curious here. And there's a few other things I felt like I could talk about, but I feel like the other things, like if you're talking about trends with like covers, I feel like that's been talked about more. And like I've made myself really clear. Like I really enjoy the old school covers for the most part. I like my full art covers where they were like a painting. And I'm not as big a fan of the minimalist thing that's new. I feel like a lot of that is marketing. It's usually cheaper to get something like that. But sometimes it does seem like it's just that's the choice. Because even like books that are like big and have a lot of backing, sometimes will go that cheaper route, and for whatever reason. So I always thought it was just publishers being cheap. And there are circumstances where that happens, like the last King of Lost and Art, where they decided they were going to cheap out and not pay for the nice, beautiful full color paintings anymore, partway through the series, which is super unfortunate. But also, I just feel like sometimes the minimalist thing has been popular, and sometimes it can look good. As well, if it's done well. So, but I feel like those have been talked about more. So you probably already know my thoughts there. But like I said, most of this is I just kind of want to know what all of you think about these different things, because all of them I can kind of see both sides with. I know what I think, obviously, and I've been talking about that this whole video, but I can also see the other side here. And then are there other like trends or things that you've seen happen that you feel like you have a strong opinion on either direction, and like we all hate the fake stickers and stuff like that. I mean, stuff like that, but just like other things that you used to see a lot, maybe you see less, or that it just kind of depends. I'm really curious. So it's something that I was thinking about a little bit, and then somebody in Discord commented on it too, and I'm like, okay, now I really am thinking about it even more. And so I wanted to make this video. So let me know your thoughts. Would love to hear from you in the comments down below. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description, as always, for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizardly Enclave Discord if you want to chat about books. Really, any books, anything at all. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. And, of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.